Welcome to CSIS, and thank you for being here for our final event of the year, Critical Minerals 2025 Year in Review and looking ahead to 2026. If you had told me a few years ago that we'd begin filling a room on a chilly day to talk about permitting, price volatility, and processing capacity, and that people would show up early, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are. And that alone tells you how far critical minerals have moved, from the margins to the mainstream discussions happening here in Washington. When we launched the Critical Minerals Security Program, the goal was simple but ambitious: to provide evidence-based leadership to the United States as it races to build the resilient mineral supply chains it needs for national, economic, and energy security. We wanted to take critical minerals out of policy silos and place them where they belong, at the center of national security, economic competitiveness, and geopolitical strategy. 2025 has been a game changer for minerals security. This year, we've seen unprecedented efforts across Congress, the executive branch, allies, and industry around the reality that secure minerals access underpins every part of our security. Critical minerals have become embedded in nearly every major policy debate in Washington: defense readiness, energy security, industrial policy, trade, and alliance management. But at the same time, it's been a year of sharp contrast. We've seen historic levels of policy attention, new financing tools, and deeper engagement with allies. But we've also seen persistent market volatility, long project timelines, fragile demand signals, and strategic competitors continuing to weaponize key mineral supply chains. There's a growing recognition in Washington and beyond that minerals are not just commodities. They're in fact strategic assets essential to our security. They sit at the foundation of our defense industrial base, energy resilience, and technological leadership. When access is secure, nations compete, and when it's not, they become vulnerable. Looking ahead to 2026, the stakes only rise. The cost of delay, whether in permitting, financing, or coordination, continues to grow. The luxury of time is not something the sector or our country has. Today's event is designed to do three things. First, to take an honest stock of where we are after 2025, what's worked and what hasn't, and what gaps continue to be. Second, to examine how government tools, private capital, and allied partnerships can be better aligned with the commercial industries of a complex industry. And third, to focus on what success really looks like over the next year, not in strategy documents, but in projects advanced, capacity built, and risks reduced. And that's why today's conversation matters. We've brought together an outstanding lineup of speakers from the administration, from Congress, and from industry who are shaping these decisions in real time. Their participation reflects a broader truth that critical minerals are no longer niche, but they are firmly part of the mainstream U.S. national strategy discussion. And critical minerals are one of the few areas of bipartisan consensus, and that's allowed us here at CSIS to work across administrations and alongside leaders in the White House, Departments of War, State, Treasury, Energy, and Commerce, as well as other agencies, and across the aisle in Congress. You'll see that bipartisan momentum reflected today throughout the program, particularly in the joint legislative efforts you'll hear from members of Congress working together to strengthen U.S. mineral security. That trust across parties and institutions is what allows our work at CSIS to have real-world impact. Before we begin, I have a few quick thank yous to the people who make this work possible. I want to begin by recognizing our donors, whose leadership and support makes this work possible. Their support enables us to carry out analytical work and have important convenings with policymakers, industry, and allies around some of the most consequential issues facing U.S. economic and national security. In particular, we're grateful to Vale Base Metals, BHP, South 32, and Freeport-McMoRan for their support of today's event. Second, I want to recognize the team behind this program, because none of this happens without them. Meredith Schwartz has helped build this program from the ground up with me. She's a fantastic sounding board and big thinker. Kester and Horvath keeps the entire operation moving and somehow makes the impossible look rather routine. And Samantha Dady, who recently joined the team, is already strengthening our work. I walk into our office with ambitious, sometimes crazy ideas. Let's start a new video series bringing together ministers from around the world, publish a new playbook, or host an event for hundreds of people that bring together the legislative and executive branches of government. And instead of asking why, they ask when. And finally, I want to express my deep gratitude to CSIS leadership. Building this program from the ground up has been a significant undertaking, and it simply would not have been possible without their trust, support, and encouragement. I'm particularly grateful to Dr. Hamry, Craig Cohen, Namu Thomas, Alex Kissling, and Frederick Onwanyu, along with our phenomenal department leadership, Seth Jones, Emily Harding, and Christine Brezo. I wake up every day grateful to work under such exceptional leadership that encourages us to think bigger and reminds us that our favorite KPI here at CSIS is not comfort, but impact. And finally, I've spent 12 years working on critical minerals, and this moment would have been unthinkable not long ago. Today, critical minerals sits at the center of conversations from the White House to Capitol Hill, from boardrooms to allied capitals, shaping some of the most consequential decisions. But one thing to not lose sight of, the impact of what we discussed today goes far beyond the city. As a native Detroiter, I often think about what it takes to make America's auto industry, which employs 4.5 million people, competitive. When rare earth export restrictions earlier this year brought production to halt at a Ford manufacturing plant in the Midwest, it became unmistakably clear that critical minerals policy has real consequences for workers and communities across the country. What we discuss in Washington today reaches factory floors, supply chains, and livelihoods nationwide. Thank you all for being here and for choosing to spend your day talking about some of the most complex and consequential issues of our time. I trust it will be worth it. With that, it's my pleasure to turn things over to the President of our Defense and Security Department, Seth Jones.
Thanks, Gracelin, and thanks to all of you for being here. As Gracelin said, my name is Seth Jones. I run the Defense and Security Program here at the department at CSIS. And it's a big pleasure to welcome all of you, both here in person and online, to the Critical Minerals Security Program's flagship event, Critical Minerals 2025 Year in Review and looking ahead to 2026. But I do want to begin before we start from my perspective, which is watching a range of our programs, just recognizing the outstanding contributions, Gracelin, of both you, your team, and the Critical Minerals Security Program. In less than 2 years, I have watched this program, Gracelin, your program, emerge as a central voice shaping U.S. thinking on mineral strategy, supply chain resilience, and the intersection of economic policy and national security. It's been very impressive to watch. Now, I work a lot on the industrial base, and everywhere I go now, whether it's Europe, Asia, the Middle East, Latin America, Africa, there is a significant component now in conversations at 10 Downing Street that I have, obviously here at the White House, and with all of our key allies and partners on the aspect of critical minerals. I think, if anything, what we've seen in 2025 is that mineral security is national security. The two are inseparable. Critical minerals are embedded in virtually every major U.S. defense platform that we deal with and that I've been on, from aircraft and naval vessels to missile systems, communications infrastructure, and emerging technologies such as AI and hypersonics. When we talk about deterrence and when we talk about warfighting, we're also talking about access to materials, whether in peacetime or wartime, like titanium and cobalt and graphite, that makes those systems possible and that shape geopolitical competition for years to come. The question for policymakers is not whether critical minerals matter, but how quickly the United States and its partners can build resilient, competitive, and secure supply chains to support them. This past year has highlighted both the progress and the opportunity, as well as the vulnerabilities. We've seen unprecedented policy activity from the administration, from expanded financing tools to deeper engagement with key allies and partners. At the same time, markets remain volatile. Project timelines can be long. Strategic competitors continue to consolidate influence across critical segments of the minerals value chain. This tension between urgency, execution, but also the competitive nature of this is the focus of today's discussion. Looking ahead to 2026, the stakes, I think, are only going to increase. The demand for copper, for lithium, for rare earths and other critical minerals is only accelerating. Geopolitical competition is only intensifying, and the gap between policy ambition on the one hand and on-the-ground capacity on the other remains a defining challenge for U.S. economic and, of course, national security. So today's program brings together an extraordinary and exceptional group of speakers from the administration, from Congress, from industry, and their perspectives reflect something that Gracelin mentioned earlier and that we'll talk about today, which is minerals security is no longer a niche policy area. It has moved squarely in the mainstream of U.S. national security. It's not new in many ways. For those who've looked back at World War I and World War II and during the Cold War, there were key elements of mineral security. But it is worth noting that after the Cold War, when policymakers embraced the peace dividend, what we did see is a largely liquidation of the national defense stockpile from more than $20 billion in 1989 as adjusted for inflation to under $1 billion by 2021. Domestic mining and processing, which were already under pressure, had little incentive to expand. China, of course, took the opposite approach, we know, through sustained state investment, global acquisitions, and strategic pricing. It built the world's most competitive, comprehensive mining and processing ecosystem, one that now shapes the global markets and the geopolitical leverage. This history matters because it brought us to where we are today. 2025 was the year where the U.S. really began to confront and to start reversing 3 decades of strategic drift. Throughout the day today, we're going to also examine where to look ahead in 2026. At CSIS, as a major research institution, our goal, and Gracelin mentioned impact there, is really to help illuminate the strategic landscape, to bring clarity, to bring rigorous analysis, and to bring frameworks that support better decision-making and have impact on the national and international stage. So, Gracelin, I do want to thank you for everything that your critical minerals security program has done and continues to do in this area. When it started in 2024 to where it is today, you really have taken it to extraordinary heights. The conversations today, the goal is to help illuminate what progress has been made and where more work is needed, because there is more work that's needed. Thank you for being here. Your expertise and engagement on these issues that we'll discuss today are essential to this effort. We're grateful for your partnership, and I really look forward to the discussions ahead. So, Gracelin, with that, I will pass this back to you, and thank you.
Thanks, Seth. A few quick housekeeping notes before we get started with our discussions for the day. So first of all, restrooms are located on this floor. If you go out the door, turn right and follow the corridor back down to the end there, you will find the restrooms. Between sessions, we'll have designated coffee breaks as well as lunch this afternoon. To keep us on schedule for a very full day, we ask that you return to your seats promptly. Nothing is worse than herding cats, guys. We'll close the day out with a drinks reception. And I trust today you'll find that today's content is as substantive as the relationships you'll get to build during coffee breaks, lunch, and drinks. With that, I'm delighted to welcome Jarrod Agen to the stage for our Keynote Fireside, Building America's Minerals Dominance. I am really excited about this morning's fireside.
Yeah, me too.
So Jarrod is the Deputy Assistant to the President of the United States and Executive Director of the National Energy Dominance Council. He also served as Deputy Assistant to President Trump in his previous term in the White House, and in between terms was over at Lockheed Martin, the world's largest defense company. You have also served in a variety of U.S. government agencies ranging from Homeland Security, the EPA, and State Department.
True, very true. And I'm using all of it right now to help us.
You must be very busy.
Yeah, it's a good busy. I'm excited because we're a new entity, the National Energy Dominance Council, and I think it's proven out why the president was right to create the council. You've seen across the board, about drill baby drill and oil and gas, but we've been a big part on kind of the president is using energy, and I include critical minerals in that, for diplomacy. And so what you've seen is these massive trade deals, but also he's using it as leverage in negotiating all over the world. And what you've also seen is just a renewed urgency around critical minerals, and the Energy Dominance Council has played a key part in that. And I think it just, again, demonstrates, as you've seen out over the course of the year, that this isn't just words. The president is taking a completely different approach to all of energy, but specifically critical minerals.
What does mineral dominance really mean in actual practice for the United States? Is it self-sufficiency? Is it control over certain strategic nodes of the supply chain? Is it trusted supply chains with allies? What is minerals dominance?
Yeah, I think the simplest answer to that is that our military has what it needs, and that our entrepreneurs here in the United States have what they need. And so to unpack that a little bit, it's essentially that we are not reliant on any foreign entity for any of the must-have critical minerals or the supply chain to those critical minerals. And so we have taken, as I've mentioned, a very unique approach, a streamlined approach, both from the permitting perspective to funding perspective to partnerships that really, I think, is going to be one of the marquee things that this president is going to be known for, is just kind of throwing the old rule book out the window and taking a completely renewed interest, an urgent interest in making the United States energy dominant, but also a leader in critical minerals again. And the way he has leveraged every tool at his disposal to do that, I think, will go down in history as one of the key moments and key policy decisions that President Trump made.
And what do you think is the single biggest constraint holding us back from achieving this?
So I think we're making a ton of progress. The key here is you can look across the board. Permitting, huge problem. We handicapped ourselves here in the U.S. under the previous administration of just an all-out war on mining in the United States. And so we were able to kind of quickly turn that around, in that using things like Fast 41 and emergency permitting to switch that around. I do think we're making progress. The issue is, as kind of everybody who's here I'm sure knows, is it's very long lead when it comes to mining and critical minerals. Ramping this up, it takes a long time. And so the biggest constraint we have is we need to move fast now, but how do we ramp up as quickly as possible? And so funding becomes a big part of that. And that's where these partnerships between the US government and private sector become key, because we can do so much from the government side. We need the private sector side to join in. And then also, we need global partnerships, because there is this, we are blessed with resources here. There are other countries that are blessed with other resources that we need, and then we need to ramp up the processing. And so all of that takes time. And so we've moved very quickly in the early stages of this administration. We've made a ton of progress, and like I said, we're using different tools that the president has at his disposal, but it is going to take a global effort, and all of that takes time to ramp up.
I want to come back to the tools in a second, but first, how is this administration thinking about risk sharing with the private sector? Mining is a notoriously complex sector because you have the long project timelines, you have price volatility, you have geopolitical risks, you have technology risks. How are you thinking about risk sharing with the private sector?
Yeah, well, you've seen a completely different approach to any of this than ever before. You saw that with the equity deals, the debt deals that we've done. The MP deal, for example, I think was kind of a line in the sand that we were not going to do things the old way, that we were going to take a very aggressive approach to close the gap with China. But we view it essentially that as I've mentioned, we can do a lot from the federal government, but it's also about the markets, and it's about what the private sector do, and it's about no one affecting the markets that could dump minerals or change kind of the private sector side to this. And so we view it as we're going to put skin in the game. A lot of that helps when you're working on mining globally. You know, when you're in the international game and you know that you're working with a company or a project that the U.S. backs, and so that gives it more credibility and more ability to kind of sustain those long lead times that are needed, that if the U.S. government is behind it, you know that this project is probably going to see through fruition. And so that's the way we look at it. We know, you know, we're tracking it very closely of what minerals we need, what we're behind and need to ramp up on. And so we take it very seriously, and we're doing a very methodical approach across the board, across the periodic table, to ensure the president wants to be the leader in all of this.
What do you think the most effective tools the administration has used this year are?
So I think it's the aggressiveness and the business approach of President Trump, and so I'll give a couple examples. So in Alaska, you know, there's a ton of resources at our disposal in Alaska, and a lot of mining that could be done and has lingered for decades. Same can be said about copper mining in Arizona. I mean, it's just these projects that we've identified. We know the resources are there, but they've just languished in either funding problems or legal problems forever. And so in Alaska, for example, we had a project to build the Ambler Road, which would get access to tons of mining potential. And it's just, they've talked about this road for decades and no one was ever able to do it. Well, we brought it to the president in the Oval and explained to him that he could use his authority to basically jumpstart this project. And he looked at it and he also felt, hey, this could be a win for every American as well. So he wanted to build a partnership with some of the mining companies that were up there. And so that's what we did. We built a partnership with them. And then he signed the approvals to get the road built. And so I think it's just President Trump has taken a new approach where he is tired of the bureaucracy. He is tired of the kind of legalization of weaponizing the legal lawsuits against these projects. I mean, that's what really slows these down. We can do a lot on permitting to expedite permitting, and we can do Fast 41 to get things through the bureaucracy. But if people are using the legal system to shut these things down, that's what the president knows is a huge, massive problem. And so he's willing to use his authority to move these things faster. And then obviously one of the big parts we're doing now is working with Congress and helping to streamline permitting. I mean, that's across the board and help critical minerals and all the other energy projects we're involved in. But I think the most effective thing is the president just wielding his authority, because he knows that this is hugely important and he knows that he wants America to be first.
I mean, I'm really excited for those of you in the audience. We're going to be talking to South 32 later about their Fast 41 permitting. We have MP Materials to talk about their deal. So we're going to hear about how a lot of these tools have worked this year in terms of accelerating these projects. So to my next question, how does this administration prioritize investing in minerals at home versus working with allies? Yeah,
it's a great question. So we're America first. I mean, our priority is America first. The couple projects I talked about in Alaska or in Arizona, I mean, these are issues that have been slowed down, and so we want to jumpstart those. At the same time, there are massive partnerships we can build and allies we can utilize the resources they have. Australia, for example, huge mining, a lot of great mining companies out of Australia who are working here in the U.S. They have access to different resources that we don't have. And so building those partnerships of this kind of global alliance is going to be helpful so that we can all work together to close any gaps we might have versus what China's doing. And so you've seen that systematically, the president taking the America First approach, but also finding where is it a strategic benefit to us. So Saudi Arabia, when the Crown Prince was here, we signed a critical mineral deal there. Australia is another one. Some of our Asian allies as well, and when the president went overseas there. And so he knows, like, hey, he's going to think of America first, but also there are ways that we need to work together because of the processing and where the resources are in the supply chain. We're going to need to work with our allies so that we're all working on the same page.
So we've talked a lot about more mineral supply, producing more minerals. Now, the other half of that equation, because we're in an era of price volatility, is that we need to increase the demand for the minerals coming out of the US and for allied supply chains. How is this administration working with downstream industries, defense, semiconductors, auto manufacturers, to think about how to create a durable demand signal for US minerals?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do think this is one of the strengths of how the president has set up the team at the White House. So I cannot tell you, every day people are coming in and meeting with my team, with NSC as well, on what their demand signal is, and so what they are needing these critical minerals for. And so there is no lack of that. I mean, anything from technology to autos to defense. I mean, it is across the board. A huge urgency to make sure that our supply chain and the critical minerals that they need are flowing. And so this is, again, one of the things that was key to how the president and how this White House works. We're working directly with industry, I think, like never before. So they felt comfortable coming into the White House, explaining what is happening on the global scale, and that there is an urgency. And so that's why the president acted so fast to, get funding through Congress, or to set up these private sector deals, so that there wasn't a hindrance in industry that could have happened if somebody wasn't taking it so seriously.
Now, when we go back and look at tools, right, we have DPA, we have XM, we have DFC, we have IBAS. What tools do you think are working particularly well right now?
Yeah, well, all of them. I mean, so we need them all, and they're all coming to the table. I do think that is the difference. Again, just to give you a little of the inner workings. I mean, we pull that kind of group together from Department of War to XM to DFC on a weekly basis to kind of talk about what is happening and what each work stream can do to help it. I think all of those are kind of moving as fast as possible, and all cylinders are go when it comes to the government entity. I think the key is we obviously cannot do it alone. There is a lot we can do, but it's also key that the markets are reacting the way the markets should react, and so that the private sector is also taking the steps they need to take and working with us on it. And so, again, and then you pull in all of our international allies who have more access to different resources or the processing. And so I do think that from the federal government side, the funding mechanisms are working. You've seen announcements happening. I am sure more announcements will come. But it's really that it's several groups involved where the private sector is key, and they need to move just as fast as we're moving in the government.
So, Jarrod, if we come back in 3 years, right, and we reconvene and have this conversation again, what hard outcomes would prove that U.S. minerals dominance is real?
Yeah, I think what we want to see is the ability for the U.S. to not be reliant on any adversary out there or any other foreign entity, that we control our own destiny when it comes to our supply chain and our critical minerals, that the deals continue. I mean, we've set a good pace so far, but this is just the first year. We're just at the beginning. I think you're going to see throughout this administration historic deals when it comes to critical minerals, historic partnerships with the private sector, and then really a revitalization of mining in this country. I mean, I cannot overestimate how many mining companies come in to see us, and even young people who come in to see us who've never been interested in mining, who now are because they've seen the president talk about it. And so if we can revitalize mining in the U.S., get these projects that have lingered for decades, get more people into the mining sector, young people into the mining sector, people learning about mining, educating about mining, and really turn the tide on this war on mining here in the U.S., I think that will be a key over the next 3 years.
Now, Do you ever worry that, 2025 was a landmark year for our minerals world, right? The weaponization of these minerals basically affected every part of our security, national, economic, and energy. Do you worry that we might lose sight of how consequential this year, that some of our progress may roll back 5 or 10 years from now? Because we were once a mining leader.
Well, I think that's where we try to move very fast and where we want to make these deals stick. And so I agree with you. I do think that we want everything that we're doing now to hold, and so that there is not a pendulum swing back the other way, because it will have catastrophic consequences on us. As we've talked about, mining is very long lead. And so I think, in talking to President Trump, he wants lasting deals, lasting projects. And so this is why he's taken such great interest in things like Ambler Road or copper in Arizona. He knows that if he is the person that can get these things done, and he is going to wield the tools to get them done, and once they're off and running and jobs are coming and it is affecting our supply chain here and we're getting the resources we need, it's going to be very hard to then make the argument or kind of the legal battles to shut off something that, is affecting 25% of your copper in the United States. It's just, who's going to want to make that argument years from now? Or if it just fundamentally changes mining in Alaska, who's going to want to turn it back after it's already up and functioning and running?
Are there any other mechanisms that we can be thinking about in terms of how to make these solutions durable? Because mining is one of those sectors that's very politically vulnerable.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's working with Congress. This is the key. We've had a lot of good success in the One Big Beautiful Bill. We had more funding towards mining and towards critical minerals than you've seen. I think now that the key element that we're pushing for is some of the permitting reform and some of the judicial reform that might be needed. I think those are the lasting things. Everybody does come to us. They love what President Trump's doing, but the question is, okay, how do we codify a lot of this in Congress so that it is lasting, so that 10 years from now we're not worrying about it? And so I think that is the key that we're focused on now, is some of the permitting reform, both to streamline the permitting, but also on the judicial reform side, so that the legal battles can't hold up these projects.
That requires working with states.
If it does, but I think, again, you're seeing a softening even from some of the hard people who have maybe been anti-mining in the past. I think they're realizing this is not only a national security issue, it's jobs in their state, it's fundamental supply chain that helps their state overall, and it helps America across the board when it comes to, some of these are huge percentages of what we could efficiently make here in the United States when it comes to critical minerals. And so when it comes to processing centers, again, these are opportunities that we have just not invested in the past, and they can be huge economic boons to the states. And so we've seen a lot of interest from states in partnering less on critical minerals.
And what do you think? There's so many timelines about when we'll be less reliant on China or be self-sufficient from China. What do you think?
Well, the only answer the president likes is he wants it done yesterday. So yeah, we're going to move as fast as possible. I think we've seen a lot of progress. If we were sitting here a year ago, things have fundamentally changed over the course of the year. I think things are going to increase even in the speed that they're changing now, because we've set up a lot of the tools and we've got some of the funding there already to do it. We've got a great team focused on it. All the way from the president, the chief of staff, James Blair, several cabinet secretaries from Burgum, Wright, Secretary Lutnick. There are so many people now focused on critical minerals, and they have been for several months, that I don't see us letting off the gas on critical minerals at all, and we're going to continue to do it. And it's been a huge part of the discussions on the global scale when you talk about Secretary Besson and Jameson going and having these global conversations. Critical minerals is a key part to almost every dialogue we have internationally.
So one of the things we need to do is to also make American mining more cost competitive. It's probably never going to be Chinese cost of production, but we want to make it more cost competitive. A core part of that is bringing our energy costs down, and it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg, because we need more minerals to make more energy, and I need more energy to make minerals competitive. Mm-hmm. How do we break that kind of cycle that we're in to make it cheaper to process here?
Yeah, it's a great point. This is where it's great to have the council at the White House, because we're also focused on this. So we're trying to also at the same time fundamentally change the critical infrastructure here in the U.S. so that there is access to power. Not only we talk about AI, this is a big thing that I'm often asked about, is how the data center is going to affect our power generation. But the processing and critical minerals are also going to we need power for that as well. So we have huge resources when it comes to natural gas, when it comes to oil. We've got to get the infrastructure so that it can flow throughout the U.S. So that people have access to power. A big thing we're looking at now is obviously we've bet largely on nuclear. The president came out with landmark EOs on nuclear. That will be a huge component going forward. Again, multiple nuclear companies come in to see us all the time, and there's huge investment flowing into nuclear. And so I do think ultimately when you look at small modular reactors and how that whole space is changing, all of that compared to just the abundance of natural gas we have, we just need to build the critical infrastructure here in the U.S., and we can do it so that all of those power sources are flowing. It's happening in several parts of the country. The problem we have is if you've invested in critical infrastructure, in a lot of the red states have done that. They've followed kind of the president's philosophy on natural gas, coal, and now nuclear. Where the problem is in the Northeast or in California, for example, they have underinvested in those. And so that's where you see electricity prices, for example, raise. And so they're not drawing the investment in those areas. If everybody gets on the same page with the president and everybody is investing in where we have an abundance of power and help flow that critical infrastructure, you're going to see energy prices go down across the board.
So finally, if you had one message for investors and project developers to hear from the White House today, many of whom are in the room today, about your commitment to critical minerals, what would it be?
You have no better friend than President Donald Trump. He is looking at this from a all-new perspective, as you've seen so far. He is willing to put the U.S. government behind important projects. We are willing to flow capital and funding into important projects to get them off the ground. And so this president is the best friend mining has ever had, and I think that's going to continue. And so we want to be a resource at the White House. We want to hear from investors and private sector. If you have great energy projects, critical mineral projects, please come in to see us. And the president wants to be a leader on this, and that is going to take the government working with investors, working with the private sector. But as you've seen so far, the mining community has no better friend than President Donald Trump.
Jarrod, thank you so much for your leadership in this space, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.